This is the Tim and Maggie Roadshow, I think number 5. And if I'm wrong, I'll fix it in the description. This is a little bit later in the day, so there's a shadow. I am your driver. And we've decided we want to talk about chord inversions and figured bass. Now, chord inversions are more directly related to piano tuning. Figured bass is indirectly related to piano tuning.
But figured bass is the basis for all the music you know. And you'll see why learning to tune to different intervals is crucially important to making a piano sound good.
Woohoo! Figured bass. Is that why they call it figured bass? Because it's, I was attempting to make a joke and I think I'm going to fail. Is because it's the base for all knowledge.
And they call it figured bass because they write it out with figures.
It's in the bass line.
It's in the bass line.
It's in the bass line, yeah. I know. I was attempting to make a joke and I failed. So anyway.
But we'll explain that after we talk about the basic concept of chord intervals.
Intervals and inversions. Now, I have covered, just so he knows, I have covered intervals and inversions of intervals. I have not covered chord inversions, which I do plan to get to, but I haven't done my own little video on it yet, so I don't know how much he's going to explain that, but I've asked him to talk about it. So, where do you want to start?
Well, the inversion of intervals is where you take two notes and you take the bottom one up an octave. Or you take the top one down an octave, the result is the same. And chord inversion may seem to be a second use of the same word, but it's not. It's where you take a 3-note entity or a chord and you take the bottom note up an octave. You have a G chord, G, B, D, and you run the G up an octave. It's still G, B, D, but the G is on top.
So it's B, D, G.
Right. And
G's on top.
And B is in the bass.
Yes.
Now, that's what we're interested in, is what's in the bass. All sound, music or otherwise, is perceived by our ears and is structured from the bottom up. Not from the top down, not from middle out, from the bottom up. The tuba in the band, the double bass in the orchestra, the electric bass in a rock band can make everybody else look bad.
Yeah, they can. They really can.
And they often do.
If they're sharp,
everybody sounds flat.
Everyone sounds flat. It's just the way
If they're
it is.
flat, everyone sounds sharp.
Yes.
People don't say, man, that bass player is a jerk. No, they say that band sounds terrible.
That's right.
I was a bass player.
Yeah. So, how did your band sound?
Not great.
Oh no. So,
Draw your own conclusion.
when you take the bass, the root of a chord, and flip it up an octave,
And you change the nature of the chord, but it's still G, B, D.
and what do you call that?
It's still G major.
Well, yeah, but what inversion?
You call that first inversion.
Thank you.
When it's G, B, D with G on the bottom, you call it root position.
Right.
When the B is on the bottom, you call it first inversion. Now the B being on the bottom makes the G and the D on top. It makes little difference if you switch the G and the D around above it as a voicing thing. But what's on the bottom, which is what I was getting at before,
Right.
and I didn't finish it.
Because I so rudely interrupted.
What's on the bottom,
I'm gonna do it
that's
again.
why I talked about the bass player. What's on the bottom changes the nature of the chord.
So if it's B, D, G, or B, G, D, it doesn't matter. It's still first inversion.
Right, it's still first inversion. It may be a tiny bit different, but changing what's in the bass makes it substantially different because we hear from the bottom up.
Ugh, that was bumpy.
For some reason, though, we don't pay the bass player more.
Right.
I mean, you'd think.
Right.
You'd think you'd want to play the bass.
Yeah.
At least that's what the bass section.
Everybody pays the melodic line more, or at least equal.
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
Yeah, like the Pachelbel canon. I'm the flute player. I have. I have this nice little beautiful line, and you have.
Bum 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 bum.
How many times?
1,000.
1,000 times. That's what he gets to play over and over and over. Okay.
But it's important. If her work is going to sound like anything.
Yeah, so if he's sharp, it doesn't matter how beautiful my line is, it's going to sound like crap. Okay, I'm sorry, I got off target again. We're off topic again. Where are we? We are talking, yes.
We're in West Virginia.
We're in first inversion. We're talking about first inversion. Yes.
So how does it sound different? Well, a root position chord has a power and finality to it, and a first inversion chord does not. It has a sweetness and a temporary character to it, and you're always in trouble when you use value terms like that. But it would be unsatisfying to end a piece of music at the very end on a first inversion chord. It would sound unstable.
Okay. What's next?
Second inversion.
Second inversion. Imagine that's what's
We
next.
do the same thing again.
Yes.
We take now that the third of the chord, we were using G, B, D. We've already put the G on top. Now we're going to put the D on the bottom.
Yeah.
We're going to move
So
the
the
B.
G went up, the B went up, now the D is left.
Yeah, we're going to move the B up an octave.
So that's second inversion.
So now the G and the B are above, and we don't have different names for their order, the different orders or voicings that they're in, or how many times they might be doubled with the octave. But we're very interested in that D on the bottom. That's called second inversion.
Yes.
Second inversion is rarely used except for creating a very unstable and contradictory kind of dissonance. Renaissance theorists called it a consonant fourth, even though they consider the fourth a dissonant.
Right.
Because there's a fourth now between the fifth and the root, which was originally a fifth.
Right.
Note that the fifth is lower on the harmonic series than the fourth.
No, wait, let me interrupt real quick. Rudely. When he says root, he doesn't mean the root of the chord. G is still the root of the chord. When he says root in that context, he means whichever note is on the bottom, right?
No, root's always the...
Well, you said D, root. Did you not? Did I
I don't think
misunderstand?
so.
Oh, I might have misunderstood. Okay.
If I did, I messed up.
Okay.
D is in the bass.
D is in the bass, but it's not the root of the chord.
It's not the root of the chord, it's the fifth of the chord.
I might have been distracted by a road sign. Okay, go ahead.
I might have screwed up.
We'll find out when we watch the video later. Okay.
But I was the bass player, so if I screw up, you look bad.
That's right. It's my video. I'm gonna look bad.
You're the video person.
I'm the video person.
Yeah. I'm the color man here.
Okay. But I'm dependent on you for this because it was. Well, I'm not dependent.
I'm the consultant.
He's the consultant. All right. So what were you going to say more about? I'm sorry, second inversion. Before I interrupted you again.
Second inversion.
Yes. Not as strong.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's a lot of its recognizability is gone.
And the fourth. Oh, that's what it was. The fourth is higher up on the harmonic series. There's more in common with the notes. There's more harmonics that line up in two notes that are a fifth apart than are a fourth apart.
And with our GBD with D on the bottom,
yeah, you got fewer harmonics lining up.
The harmonics above D are going to include an A and an F sharp both of which will be dissonant with the root. So it's going to be a tense sounding chord. And the most common use of it is that you go from a 1 chord in the second version followed by a 5 chord. And so it's a very unsatisfying 1 tonic chord going to the dominant and then going after that to the 1 in root position. So you have a setup. Wait, that's not a real 1. Then you have a 5, which is your penultimate chord, and then you go to 1. Pick up a church hymnal, and say it has 300 hymns in it, and 250 of them will end that way.
Yeah.
1 second inversion, 5, 1 root position.
If you don't know what we're talking about, you have to go back and look at the previous roadshow. So anyway.
But other than that, you don't see much use of it. Whereas the first inversion with the 3rd on the bottom is a pretty common sound.
Okay. So that's first and second inversion of a chord, of a triad chord.
Right. And it doesn't, the chord doesn't lose its identity. It still has the same 3 notes in it.
Yeah. Oh, it's bright.
If you add octaves above those notes, G, B, D, more G's, more B's, more D's above, doesn't change much. Start adding octaves below, then you're monkeying with the overtones that create the strength of the chord.
Is that where I'm going? I'm going this way.
Take in an exit.
And just like with first inversion, second inversion, it doesn't matter what order the notes above, as long as the D's on the bottom. It can go D, B, G, or D, G, B. It doesn't matter. It's still second inversion.
And it's the bass that generates the identity of the chord.
Yes. Okay.
All music is that way. I don't care if it's Australian didgeridoo music, heavy metal rock, or
Right.
Mozart.
We perceive things from
we
bottom up.
perceive sound, or if it's a motorcycle driving by making a big noise. You perceive sound from the bottom up. That's how your brain works. That's how physics work. If we were doing radio electronic, we would be concerned more about the fundamentals than the overtones.
Yeah. Overtones go up. They don't. There's no undertones
There's no overtones
we know of.
going down.
that we perceive. Anyway, now overtones might have overtones, but that still goes up. But that's another video. Okay.
Now, undertones will have their own harmonic series that might be put in motion sympathetically by overtones above.
Ooh.
And that might appear to be an undertone. And it is, but it's not generated by
The fundamental.
fundamental.
Right. Okay. So are we gonna? Do we need
And
to
that
talk?
would be one messed up piano that did that. I've
Watch
seen
me
it.
find it.
Oh, I've seen it.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's the
Sorry, traffic.
That's the UPS man. Don't get in front of him. He's bringing us a package.
Yeah. Okay, I see where I'm going.
Probably.
I have a traffic issue.
Piano parts.
All right, we're good now. So, do we need to talk more about inversions or anything, or are we gonna go right into figured bass?
That's something that one could practice. And so more explanation probably isn't going to help.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna be making a video on it, so I'll put this roadshow video in my playlist that's somewhere near that video whenever I get it made.
It's not an unusual technical practice for a pianist who's learning to go, let's say D minor, D, F, A, E, F, A, F, A, D, A, D, F, and practice that on any instrument.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're practicing thirds and triads, arpeggios. Yeah.
Starting on the different notes
That's
of the
all
chord.
normal. That's normal practice. Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And when the root's on the bottom, it's strong. When the third's on the bottom, it's sweeter. And when the fifth's on the bottom, it is unstable.
I should make a video of that. Ooh, I think I will. I made a video of how to play scales. I'll make a video of, I did a video of how to play triads, I think. If not, I'll make sure I did. But we'll talk about arpeggios in a video, and we'll play some. That might be fun.
And as an exercise for the fingers, you change where the gaps are between your fingers.
Yes. Sometimes you use 1, 3, and 5. Sometimes you use 1, 2, and 5, and it just depends.
Although bass players don't practice that because they don't care, because it's somebody else's fault.
It's somebody else's fault. Yeah, they have the power. And, although I am driving right now.
That's good.
So, yeah. So anyway. Okay, so what's next?
So there are numbers associated with this,
Yes.
generated by the actual interval.
Okay.
So you have 3 notes in a triad, and its closest position, you have the root, third, and fifth within the same octave.
Mm-hmm.
Now that becomes an entire theory of music that predates Rameau. If you want to know how Bach thought, and we don't,
Yeah.
it was something like this. We do know how some of the Renaissance polyphonic vocal composers thought, because it's well documented by people like Tinctoris and Gafurius and
I remember reading some of that.
other writers
Yeah,
of the
haven't
various
read about it in a
periods of
while.
time. Praetorius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And we don't really know how Bach thought. He didn't write about theory. We know of a conversation he had with his son Carl Philipp Emanuel,
Mm-hmm.
where it appeared that Bach thought very little of Rameau's method of Roman numerals and interval classification.
Okay.
So he wasn't thinking
That
the
way.
way
The way we teach.
we think.
The way we teach that he thought. We teach Bach's method our
Any
way.
high school or college theory
Yeah.
book now is
Yeah.
just warmed over Rameau.
Okay.
And we maybe gotten better at presenting it than Rameau did.
Okay.
Guy didn't even speak English.
Imagine
Imagine that.
that. I don't think Bach did either, though.
No,
No.
Handel did.
Handel spoke English?
Yeah, his whole career
Sweet.
was in English,
Oh, that's right. I knew that.
as well as Italian.
Okay. I think I did know that. I just hadn't thought about it.
But how did these guys think? And
Well,
in their
CPE Bach spoke English, didn't he?
no JC.
I'm thinking JC. Okay. So how did these guys what?
How did they think? How did they think about music theory? Toward the end of CPE Bach's life, he was spouting Rameau terms,
Okay.
but his father did not, and did not approve.
He was old school.
He was old school, no doubt about it. He's also kind of a jerk.
Yeah, I was thinking about saying that. I was like, I better not say that. Bach was a jerk. Didn't he, he had a reputation for swatting students if they didn't practice, so he'd hit them.
He even spent time in jail because one of the students he swatted was the mayor's son. He returned a present one time to a benefactor because he had to pay an import tax on it.
Yeah,
It
well,
was too expensive for a present.
yeah. Anyway,
It's not the gift that counts, it's the expense.
yes. So, intervals. 1, 3, 5.
Yeah, so from root to third is a third, and root to fifth is a fifth.
So 1 is the root, 3 is the first interval, 5 is the next note, the interval from the root to the second note above the root.
Everybody probably knows that. 1, 3, 5, do, mi, sol, 1, 3, 5.
Yeah. Now notice he's also using scale degrees right now, but that's going to change. So go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about intervals and not scale degrees.
Sort of.
Yeah,
It's going to sort of change.
It's
Yes.
sort of change. From
Yeah.
1 to 3 is a third, 1 to 5 is a fifth.
Yes.
And from 3 to 5 is a third.
Mm-hmm.
So do to mi is a third, mi to sol is a third, do, the, sol is a fifth.
Yes.
Now, when you invert numbers, you get some funny math. If you take a third, say do to mi, or 1 to 3,
Yeah.
and you invert it, mi up to do, or 3 up to 1, then you get a sixth.
Yep.
So you take the bottom note up an octave, and then since you're counting that middle note twice, you get some funny arithmetic.
Here we go again.
Yeah. 2/3, 2 3s make a 5, not a 6. 3 and 3 is 6, right? But a third and a third make a fifth, because you're counting that middle note twice. You're going 1 2 3, and that 3 is now 1 2 3.
Yeah.
So you've counted it twice. So 2/3 make a fifth.
Right.
You have to know that.
Yeah.
So if you take root and third and put the root on top, you get a sixth. That's important to note that. Because a root position chord in the old figured bass numerical system, widespread, used by all composers for hundreds of years, and no doubt Bach had some version of it we would like to know. But he had a system where he understood what numerical structures should be followed by what other numerical structures. And he talks that way in some of his letters. We're not really sure what he meant. But a third becomes a sixth when you invert it. So what we call a 5/3 chord, a 5/3 chord is synonymous with root position.
1 3 5. You can talk, so backwards it's 5 3 1, and the 1 is always there because that's where we start from. So you just say 5 3 as an abbreviation. It's the higher note to the middle note.
Palestrina went to write harmony, and G was in the bass. He would write numbers below it, 3 5, and that would mean it's in root position.
5 3 or 3 5.
Didn't matter.
Okay.
Because when you switch the upper notes, it
Oh, right,
doesn't
it
make
doesn't
much
matter. Oh,
difference.
that's true. That's right. Okay. Sorry. Got it.
Yeah. And Palestrina himself was thinking that way. He didn't write his music that way, but as we get past 1600, Monteverdi and the Italian monadists, they start to write this shorthand down.
Yes.
With the idea that an accompanying keyboard or lute or harp could see those numbers and improvise a part.
Yeah.
A whole lot like a jazz musician does now.
Yep. It's like a lead sheet in a way, but for the bass line. So if a bassist was given a chord chart, he would see the chords, he would know what the bass line was, and he'd know what other notes were involved, and he could improv a bass line along with that.
And the scores to Monteverdi's operas that were performed many times only had 2 lines, the bass line and the melody line, and then a series of numbers.
Yeah.
And these can get quite complex, but the concept here is 3 5 means a root position, and 6, just a 6 by itself, means first inversion. It's kind of a shorthand, because our G chord that we started with, which is in first inversion, goes B, D, and then G on top, has a third and a sixth. So you would fully call that a 6/3 chord. But all chords have thirds in them, so the 3 is kind of obvious.
Yeah.
And they would just write a 6.
Same
just a
ink.
6. Likewise, a 5/3 root position, they would just write a 5 under the
Okay.
note.
I wasn't sure
And
about
that
that
would
one.
be root position. Yeah.
Got it. So 5 is root position, 6 would be first inversion.
And root positions constitute about 80% of all sounds. Sometimes they put nothing, just a bass note.
Okay.
So your lute player, harp player, organist, other keyboard would see a note and say, well, I can play the triad there.
Would
They would see a 6, and they can say, oh, I can play a triad, but that's the third I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So So
okay, so their note at the bottom. Okay, so if they saw no numbers at all, then it would be root position chord.
Yeah.
It would be the root of the chord. Okay.
Right.
And then if there were numbers other than 5, it would be an inversion, but the note given would not be the root.
Right.
Okay.
Be the third.
Yes.
And then if it says, now if you invert it twice, you need 2 numbers. Because your third has become a 6, and your fifth has become a 4th. So that's called a 6/4 chord. 6/4 means second inversion. You take your D is in the bass, and you go up a 6th, and you get a B.
Yeah.
And you go up a 4th from your D, and you get a G. So you got GBD. It's a G chord, but the D is on the bottom. And that's a 6/4.
The numbers are basically listing the intervals above the note they give you.
Right.
But if you understand a little bit more, you know what it's an inversion of a chord.
Now, if there's a number other than 3, 5, or 4, or 6, then they're giving you a non-chord tone, which is a whole other issue, and that's going to have to resolve to a third, or a 6th, or a unison or octave.
Yeah, so whatever number is there, that's the interval they want you to play above the given note. Yep.
That developed into a very complex and demanding method for reading music that takes a lot of knowledge, skill, and practice to pull off.
Yeah.
But the basic idea that the intervals above the bass generate the art of music. Now, if you're tuning a piano, it's obvious that you have to think fourths and fifths because you're using circular fifths, but you also have to come back in some fashion to getting your thirds and sixths to sound good.
Yep.
That's a more difficult issue. They are higher in the harmonic series.
Yeah.
They're further away around the circle fifth.
And we're dealing with beats.
And you're dealing with
Faster beats.
faster beats.
Fast beating intervals, right?
So if you can line up the fourths and fifths so you get a nice equal circle of fifths, and then temper that a little bit so that your thirds and sixths progress so that they become slightly faster as you go up in range, because they're going to be out of tune.
Right. We're tuning them
Literally, yeah.
out of tune. Yeah.
So that they give you the best sound that you can. You're actually deviating a bit from a perfect temperament. And you might not necessarily do it the same on every piano.
Oh, no, definitely not. Because then we're dealing with inharmonicity, and that's another ballpark.
Now, when you have a choir, like your Palestrina or Joscan or one of these masters, you know how, and it's a vocal orchestration, to use a kind of contradicting term, you know how to arrange vowels and how to stack intervals so that you get the best possible effect. But also singers are always tempering by ear all the time.
Or untempering, depending.
Yeah. You can have very pure sounds because you can change what, say, B and D are a little bit, but you're always listening to the bass.
Also, I posted a video of Donizetti's puzzle where he has a choir sing a pure interval, then they add a note that's pure to one of the others, but then they change one of the others to be pure to that, and he keeps going around, and the choir eventually gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, because they keep going pure, and it keeps making, with fifths, and so they keep getting higher because they're not tempered. It's pretty
Yeah, all music uses some kind of temperament system.
Yeah.
Piano is an interesting problem because it's a fixed pitch instrument. And so you have to find these compromises. You can't change what your notes are on the fly.
Oh, we're at a half hour. Have you ever had... I had to play figure bass once. And it was a spur of the moment thing, and it didn't have to be good, which of course it wasn't going to be. And I knew how it worked, but I had never practiced it. And I was thrilled that the adrenaline rush gave me some focus. The fear factor gave me some focus, and I did okay. I was shocked that I did all right, but I think if I tried to do it again, I would probably crash. You've played figured bass.
Oh yeah, my theory teachers all made us do.
Yeah.
Who made us do exams in figured bass keyboard.
Oh God. Yeah.
And that was a very good thing. I didn't turn out to be a harpsichord player, but
but still,
it has a lot to do with how music is structured, and it doesn't necessarily need to be Baroque where they were openly using that as a musical notation system. It still is the way people think, even in the post-Rameau era, or even in the post-Schoenberg era. We still think intervals above the bass.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to do. It's not taught as much in theory class anymore. Jazz musicians and Nashville musicians have other systems for writing chords and chord names, but it's the same thing. It really is the same thing. I think probably the best improvisers out there are the progressive jazz players. And for the Baroque musician or for the modern jazz musician, improvisation is a big part of the art. And for the Baroque musician, knowing that technique of reading the figured bass numbers was a technical necessity.
Oh yeah.
Just like for a jazz musician, being able to read a chord chart. And they tend to have the tune and not the bass line. And then chords that have number figures to tell what's in the bass. It's kind of opposite of Baroque, but it's totally based on it. It's totally based on that.
So if you have a continuo and a bass player is playing with the harpsichord and he's flat, it's the harpsichord that's going to sound bad.
Yeah. As it should be.
As it should be. All right. Do we want to have any closing thoughts?
I think that was a good closing thought.
Always remember, your bass player has power over
I can't remember the exact. Chopin said that the left hand is in charge.
The left hand is in charge.
He did. He's the left hand. The left hand conducts the right hand.
It's the bass line. Yeah, that's awesome. Alrighty. Signing off for our road show. We got more driving to do, but we're not going to record anymore and bore you to death. And there's a cop behind me. Oh boy.